Welcome to our third chapter, the So Sorted story. Today we're going to chat about how to approach living beautifully. And this is the first part of a two-part series. So if there can be such a thing as a formula to the problem of clutter, it would be this list of powerful ideas. Take stock of, and set your vision. Identify any constraints such as fear, guilt, shame, sentimentality, overestimating the value of an item to you or an intended recipient, having no time, or having two of everything for ordinary and special occasions. So let's start by having a look at taking stock of where you are in your life. Start by being honest, gentle with yourself about where you are in your life. This is a practical philosophy story, therefore, we have to start with something hokey. Don't beat yourself up if you're unhappy with where you are in your life. For starters, it doesn't help. Think of all that conventional wisdom, from the serenity prayer to the spilt milk genre. You're taking stock so that you can plan the next chapter. Simple realism is all that you require at this stage, not self-flagellation. This may be easier said than done, but you have to do it. So I have a story related to this, and I call this catharsis. A client was going through a very unpleasant divorce, her husband having left her and her children for another woman. And she was forced to move out of the family home and pack up their lifetime of memories into boxes, which were stacked in the new double garage. She could not face unpacking the boxes on her own, for the memories and the emotions that unpacking them would dredge up. So together with her, we tackled the task of unpacking, sorting, and disposing of most of their contents over several days. The process was an emotionally fraught one, but was also an extremely cathartic one. At the end of the project, she was smiling and she had stopped beating herself up over the breakdown of her marriage, to the extent that she actually signed her divorce papers on the last day of the project. So in taking stock of your life, do remember to take account of actual or likely life-changing events. We think everyone underestimates the power of long-range planning that takes account for the likely events that may impact your chosen lifestyle. The story that I relate to here is a very personal one. When our family went to live in Shanghai and Hong Kong for 5 years, we turned our Johannesburg home into a guest house, learning a new business, providing jobs for our helper and our gardener, and ensuring that we had a home on our planned return. When we came back to South Africa, we shut the guest house down early and renovated to ensure appropriate accommodation for our children through their teenage and their early adult years. If they chose to stay with us. In the designs, we provided that our home could be reconverted into an even better, more upmarket guest house if the children decided to leave home earlier, and we didn't want to rattle around in that space. We also ensured that the designs were appealing for resale if that's what we decided to do then. So we tried to plan for every scenario that we could envisage, including the present. The planning served us well. Living this type of philosophy has that kind of impact. So in a country like South Africa, the middle class has more space available relative to their peers in developed countries. If you like the space and you think this is only a benefit, then given our definition of clutter, you don't have a problem. Just remember that space tends to lead to the accumulation of too much stuff, and be mindful about this risk. Whenever we go to see a new client, we always ask the question, what is hiding in your garage, storeroom, garden shed, or basement? It's the first question that we always ask our clients when they request our services to help declutter their homes. We call these areas of the homes the black holes of clutter. In the suburban context, most homes have at least a single garage, but approximately 60% of our clients cannot park their cars in their garage because they're used as storerooms. Extra space equals space to keep unnecessary clutter. So I have a pro tip here. Treat your garage, storeroom, garden shed and basement cellar like any other room in your house, one that you would be comfortable to walk through, live in, look at every day, without feelings of apprehension, anxiety, and stress caused by clutter. I have some pictures here where you can see the before and afters of garages and storerooms, and really the first one and the middle one show what can be done when a room that's really used as a storeroom gets neatened up and you can find stuff that you're looking for and actually use it for its intended purpose. If you combine a space with the effects of living in a consumer society, you have got a somewhat toxic combination that we've seen with many of our more than 250 clients. Our societies are organized around advertising that's intended to make you feel empty. Buying stuff is supposed to fill the emptiness. So, like the rest of us, you weren't always strong enough to resist the pull. Remember, with a sale, one of the primary weapons of the consumerist society is that you have to spend money to save money. If you didn't really need that item, then you spend the purchase price. You didn't save the discount. And from our perspective, you've gained a clutter item. A story related to this aspect is also from our time spent in China, where we and most of our colleagues and friends and acquaintances fell into a consumer trap in our early months in Shanghai. Most things were very cheap by comparison to South Africa, and some of it was no doubt fake. So we started accumulating things we didn't really need with an intensity that, with hindsight, was unhealthy. Then we moved from suburbia to the south of Shanghai into an apartment in the central financial district called Pudong for our own quality of life, and we were fortunately forced to confront our excesses. This was the starting point for us being happier with living with less, and it stood us in good stead when we moved to Hong Kong. So now that we've taken stock of where we are in our lives, we move on to the next point, and that's deciding how you want to live. And we advocate starting with a question. How do you visualize your new life? What are your dreams? Develop or clarify them. It's an important question, perhaps the most important one to clarify, and for two reasons. You can overestimate the effect of living clutter-free and organized, but you can also underestimate it. So let's start with the overestimating problem. Psychologists are clear that we habituate to our states of being. You've no doubt read or heard about the famous experiment that proves that both instant millionaires and quadriplegics revert to their pre-event level of happiness rather quickly. We get used to our environments. Living without clutter and being organized will not on its own make you happy, but our experience suggests it will most likely remove a significant irritant or stressor from your life. I have a story of a client who contacted us wanting a pantry to be organized that was Instagram worthy. A disorganized pantry is a source of stress for many clients. A particular client had, in our opinion, a beautiful, spacious, well organized pantry. But her vision for that space was that it needed to look Instagram worthy, complete with all the matching canisters and baskets and other storage containers. She was clearly very stressed about the pantry in its current state. After completion of the project with us, she was visibly relieved and called all her friends to have a look at it. We really underestimated the positive impact that organizing her space would have. So I've got a pro tip here related to pantries. I call this organized containers. So use storage containers, either existing or new, to contain your items in the pantry. Storage containers don't have to be all the same and made for purpose. Cake tins, baskets, empty jars, Tupperware, they all prove to be useful pantry storage containers. We also advocate grouping like with like. That way you'll be able to tell if you have more than one item, and you'll also know when it's time to restock. These three pictures here are some of the pantries that we've worked on. This one over here was the Instagram worthy one. But you can see where we've grouped like with like in these pictures here. And then simply getting rid of clutter in a pantry has made it, in this picture here, much more efficient and easier to find what our client was looking for. I have another story related to a vision of a space. We call this garage envy. So as you can imagine, my own personal garage is as neat as a pin, with crates labelled and only necessary items stored there. We had a client who designed his garage to have the most ideal storage, with pegboards and wall hooks for tools, enough drawers and cupboard storage for every item, all perfectly stored in hanging jars, labelled crates and drawer dividers. And we were invited to his housewarming, where my husband took one look at the garage and asked why we couldn't have a garage like this. We labelled this emotion as garage envy, and we use the term often when setting goals for our clients and decluttering their garages. These photographs here were all taken from my client's garage with his permission. So only you can tell, and you should think carefully about your likely ongoing response to such a lifestyle. Our clients attest to entering a state of contented equilibrium. There are good reasons for this mood, and most of them are concrete and practical and not at all esoteric and vague. So the first reason is that you tend to find stuff more easily. And I have a really good story here to illustrate this point. Many clients find useful stuff that they often forget that they had when we've decluttered for them. A client was relocating to a retirement home, and during the move process, we assisted her to empty the contents of her 3 safes in various rooms in the old house. In the one safe, which was stacked with useless and outdated paperwork, we found a small box of coins. When we asked her about the coins, she racked her brain for a while and then recalled that her husband had helped a friend in the 1950s with a financial issue in his business, and the friend had repaid him with a box of coins. It had been sitting forgotten in the back of that safe covered in paperwork for over 50 years. We sent it to auction for her, and we achieved a whopping 2.5 million rand for the contents. And these are some of the coins which we found. So the second point, why it makes us feel good decluttering, is that you tend to feel more in control. Even if you like some clutter, which many people swear by this idea for many reasons, it's below your stress threshold, and so you're in control. I have a story about a client who was a new mom. Being a new mom can be overwhelming. She was a mom to twins and had a small home office, which she, before the birth of her twins, used as a study, as well as a workspace for her small online marketing business. However, with the change in her lifestyle, her home office became a dumping ground with all sorts of clutter. And she felt completely overwhelmed, not just with her children, but also with the rapid accumulation of stuff in her home office. After clearing the clutter for her and giving her an ordered and calm space in her home, she became visibly less stressed and felt more in control, knowing that the home office was a part of her life she could control. The third reason why we feel better after decluttering and clearing our space is that we can keep our surroundings clean and tidy more easily. It may be physically easy to move around without having to navigate clutter. We have a pro tip here, and we apply it to almost every project that we're working on. This is try not to store smalls on the floor, because it makes those areas difficult to clean, and they tend to be dumping grounds for clutter. Pantries are good examples of where floors generally become storage for larger items, as the first shelf is normally lifted off the floor. Not cleaning these areas is really unhygienic. So the fourth point of why we feel better after decluttering is that we're no longer avoiding memories, nor are we holding on to them with the assistance of stuff. We'll expand on this point in more detail later, but for now, suffice to say, it's people who put off a big clean are often motivated by the fear of confronting issues or getting rid of stuff that reminds them of meaningful people or events. So you should envisage this kind of future as a start. If it feels right to you, it probably will be a suitable change to your lifestyle. Even if you have no choice, say you're forced to downsize, you should still start with your preferably positive vision. You're likely to feel at least somewhat deprived if you believe such an event to be forced on you. We have this philosophy, we call it chocolates and pillows. On almost every job we do, we help our clients through this kind of attitudinal transition from initially resenting a step down or downsizing to at least accepting it or ideally embracing it. Day one is inevitably emotionally draining, but in every case, it does get better. Vision, which we assist with practically, whether that's sorting or deciding, planning or designing, is always the key ingredient. We live for the vision, realize the beaming smile after we've performed a turn down service in the new or in the revamped place. A turn down service is adding those little touches that makes one feel at home. A cold bottle of wine in the fridge, working bedside lamps, a new room fragrance, or fresh flowers in a vase. It's an analogy to the little touches that hotels add to make your stay feel welcome. It's those chocolate on pillow moments. I have a story related to this from an elderly client that we relocated him and his wife from a large family home of 52 years into a retirement home and assisted them to sort and get rid of tons of clutter. At the end of the moving day, when the husband was sitting in his new lounge together with a cup of tea, surrounded by special things, no clutter, I wished him a lovely evening in his new home, and his reply to me was, "Thanks to you, my dear. Every day in my new home will be a lovely one from now on." It was a heartfelt compliment that just reaffirms why we do what we do. We do want to issue two specific pieces of advice here. The first one is to be realistic. You may embrace the change, but it may not be the ideal outcome for you for all kinds of reasons. Being overenthusiastic may lead to disillusionment down the line. I have two stories here. The first one is a personal one where permanent apartment life was not for us. There are many things we missed intensely during our sojourn in China, and we acknowledge those and we look forward to the period of coming home, period coming to an end, which was the plan all along. If this had been permanent, we would have had to think really long and hard about how to adjust our lifestyles to overcome our perceived hardships. The second story relates to a client couple of ours who left their family home reluctantly to move in with their daughter. Their health was failing, and their daughter wanted them to move in with them. And it was in another province, so it was quite an upheaval for them. They were so unhappy that the situation it it would nearly destroy their relationship with their daughter. They opted to move into a retirement village nearby, and they regained their independence and they rekindled the most important relationship, which was with their daughter. The second thing to be aware of is that change doesn't happen overnight. You need to take your time in dealing with it. This story is not one about change management, and it's not a topic on its own. You need to go through the necessary stages to ensure that the fulfillment of your vision to live organized and clutter-free is both real and sustainable. Um, my final story here is relates to pacing your rate of change. Unexpectedly losing a life partner is traumatic in itself without adding a move from a family home into the mix. A client lost her husband of 40 years unexpectedly during a routine medical procedure, and she made the decision 6 months later to move away from the memories of their family home. She wasn't ready to settle into a long-term new home yet, but knew that opting for a transitional solution would give her the breathing space to plan for a future when her grieving became less overwhelming. We assisted her and her pets to settle into the temporary accommodation, and although her grief was still evident, She was much happier in her new space with the knowledge that she had the time to make a decision on her future in her own time. So that's it for this episode. In the next installment of our So Sorted story, we take a look at those factors that are holding you back from moving towards a less cluttered, more beautiful life.